My husband stood at the foot of my hospital bed and said the words so calmly I almost didn't process them. I updated the trust paperwork while you were under. Just streamlining things. His smile was thin, practiced, the kind he used with difficult clients. I was still foggy from the anesthesia, my abdomen wrapped tight from the emergency surgery that had saved my life 3 days earlier. A ruptured appendix. I had coded twice on the table. But apparently, while I was fighting for breath, he was fighting for assets. What do you mean, updated? I asked, my voice hoarse. He waved his hand like I was being dramatic. Don't worry about it now, Arlene. Just rest. He kissed my forehead, a gesture so empty it felt like a stamp on a document. Then he left. The nurse came in to check my vitals. She was young, kind, the type who actually looked at you. She saw my face. You okay, honey? I wasn't. Something cold had settled in my chest. Something that had nothing to do with pain. My name is Arlene Whitmore. I'm 43 years old. I've been married to Vincent Whitmore for 18 years. We have no children. That was his choice, not mine. For most of our marriage, I believed we were a team. I worked as a project coordinator for a non-profit that built community centers in underserved areas. Vincent was a corporate tax attorney. He made 4 times what I did. He reminded me of that often, not cruelly, just as fact. When we bought our house, it was in his name. When we opened accounts, his name came first. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself love wasn't about paperwork. But 5 years ago, my aunt, the only family I had left, passed away. She left me everything. A small farmhouse in Vermont, some savings bonds, and a stock portfolio she'd quietly built over decades. It totaled just over $800,000. Vincent's eyes lit up when the lawyer read the will. He suggested we roll it into a joint trust for tax purposes, for efficiency. I agreed because I trusted him. The trust was called the Whitmore Family Security Trust. Vincent's attorney, a man named Hugh Barlow, drafted it. I sat in the leather chair in Hugh's office and signed where they told me to sign. Vincent explained it protected us both, that it kept the assets safe from lawsuits or creditors. I believed him because I wanted to. The trust named both of us as equal beneficiaries. That was the deal. My inheritance, our future. I kept working at the non-profit. I loved the work. It didn't pay much, but it mattered. Vincent loved his work too, the kind that involved long hours and expensive dinners with clients. Over the years, I noticed small things. He started handling all the finances. He said it was easier that way, cleaner. I let him because I was busy and tired and because I wanted peace more than control. I should have read the trust documents more carefully. I should have asked more questions. But I didn't. That was my mistake. And Vincent knew it. When I got home from the hospital, the house felt different. Vincent was attentive, almost too much. He brought me tea, fluffed my pillows, asked if I needed pain medication. But his eyes were distant, calculating. He kept checking his phone. One morning, while he was in the shower, I opened his laptop. It was still logged in. I told myself I wasn't snooping. I told myself I just wanted to check our bank account, make sure the hospital bills were being handled. What I found was an email chain between Vincent and Hugh Barlow. The subject line read, "Amendment execution complete." My hands went cold. I clicked it open. The email was dated the day after my surgery. Vincent had written, "She was under when I signed. No issues. Beneficiary shift complete as discussed. Claire is now primary. Arlene secondary at 10% residual." Claire. His sister. I read it 3 times. My vision blurred. He had changed the trust while I was dying on a table. I closed the laptop carefully, my hands shaking. I went back to bed and stared at the ceiling. Claire Whitmore was Vincent's older sister. She was 50, divorced twice, and worked in real estate sales. She was polite to me but never warm. At family gatherings, she talked over me, ignored my comments, treated me like furniture. Vincent adored her. He sent her money when her commissions were low. He co-signed a car loan for her last year. I never objected because I thought that's what family did. But now she was the primary beneficiary of my inheritance. And I was worth 10%. 10% of my own money. I lay there, the surgical pain nothing compared to the sick, hollow feeling spreading through my chest. He thought I wouldn't notice. Or worse, he thought I wouldn't fight back. He was wrong. I spent the next 2 days pretending to rest. I smiled when Vincent checked on me. I thanked him for the soup. And I planned. I called Hugh Barlow's office on a Wednesday morning. I used my calm voice, the one I used in budget meetings when numbers didn't add up. Hi, this is Arlene Whitmore. I'd like to request a copy of the current trust documents. For my records. The secretary paused. Of course, Mrs. Whitmore. I can mail those out today. Actually, I said, I'll pick them up. I'm feeling better and I'd like to review them with someone. Maybe another attorney. Just to understand the structure. Another pause. Longer this time. Let me check with Mr. Barlow. She put me on hold. When she came back, her voice was tighter. Mr. Barlow says he's happy to walk you through any questions. No need for a second opinion. I'd still like the copies, I said. Today, please. She agreed. I drove to the office that afternoon, my abdomen still tender, my mind sharp. The secretary handed me a thick folder. I didn't open it there. I smiled, thanked her, and left. I drove to a coffee shop 3 towns over. I ordered tea. And I started reading. The trust document was 48 pages of legal language. But I'm good with details. That's what I did at work, passing contracts, finding gaps. I read every word. On page 32, buried in a section titled Amendment Procedures and Limitations, I found it. The clause Vincent never read. It stated clearly, any amendment to beneficiary designations requires the written, notarized consent of all current primary beneficiaries. Amendments executed without proper consent are void and subject to immediate reversal upon challenge. I read it again. And again. Vincent had signed an amendment naming Claire as primary beneficiary. But he hadn't gotten my consent. He'd forged my signature or used a power of attorney that didn't exist. Either way, the amendment was illegal. And the trust included another clause. Violations of amendment procedures result in forfeiture of the violating party's interest and reversion of assets to the original structure. Vincent had just forfeited his claim. He'd handed me the legal weapon to remove him entirely. I closed the folder. I sipped my tea. For the first time in days, I smiled. I didn't confront Vincent. Not yet. I needed leverage, documentation, proof. I hired an attorney, a woman named Diane Foss. She was recommended by a coworker whose divorce had been a bloodbath. Diane was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for dismantling bad actors in family court. I sat in her office and handed her the trust documents. I explained everything. The hospital, the email, the forged amendment. She read in silence, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she looked up at me. This is fraud, she said simply. And it's sloppy fraud. He violated the trust's own safeguards. Can we reverse it? I asked. We can do better than that, she said. She tapped the forfeiture clause. If we file a challenge, Vincent loses his beneficiary status entirely. You become the sole controller of the trust. He gets nothing. Nothing. My voice was a whisper. Nothing, she confirmed. And if he fights it, we have the email as evidence of intent. He's done. I sat back. My hands were steady now. Let's do it. Diane moved fast. She filed a formal challenge with the trust administrator, a third-party firm Vincent had chosen for neutrality. She included the forged amendment, the email chain, and the violation clauses. She requested an immediate freeze on all trust assets and a hearing. The administrator responded within 48 hours. They agreed to the freeze. They scheduled a hearing for 2 weeks out. All parties required to attend. When Vincent got the notice, he came home pale. He found me in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. I'd been playing the role of recovering wife perfectly. "Arlene," he said, his voice strained. "Did you file something with the trust?" I looked up, my face blank. "I requested a review. I wanted to understand the changes you made." His jaw tightened. "You didn't need to involve lawyers. This is family business." "Exactly," I said, my voice soft. "It's my family's money. And you changed it without asking me." "I was protecting us," he said. His voice was rising now. "Protecting us from what, Vincent?" "From me." He didn't answer. He just stared at me like I'd become someone he didn't recognize. Good. I wanted him off balance. "The hearing is in 2 weeks, I said. "You should probably call Hugh." He left the kitchen without another word. That night, I heard him on the phone in his study. His voice was low, urgent. I pressed my ear to the door. "She's fighting it," he hissed. "She hired Diane Foss." "Yes, that Diane Foss." A long pause. "I don't know how she found out. She must have seen the email." Another pause. "Hugh, fix this. I'm not losing 800,000 because you didn't bury the claws deep enough." I stepped back from the door. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. From clarity. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't panicking because he'd hurt me. He was panicking because he'd been caught. I went back to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of wine. I sat at the table in the dark. And I waited for the hearing. The 2 weeks crawled by. Vincent tried different tactics. First, he was apologetic. He brought me flowers, said he'd made a mistake, said he'd reverse everything if I just dropped the legal action. I smiled and said we'd discuss it after the hearing. Then he was angry. He accused me of being vindictive, of turning a misunderstanding into a war. I stayed calm. I said I just wanted transparency. Then he was desperate. He offered to split the trust 50-50 again, said Claire didn't even know about the change, said it was all just paperwork that got ahead of him. I told him we'd let the administrator decide. He started sleeping in the guest room. Fine by me. I used the time to prepare. Diane coached me on what to say, how to present the facts without emotion. "Let the documents speak," she said. "Let him bury himself." The night before the hearing, Vincent tried one last time. "Arlene, please. Don't do this." I looked at him across the kitchen island. "You did this," I said quietly. "I'm just enforcing the rules you agreed to." The hearing was held in a conference room downtown. Gray walls, long table, no windows. The trust administrator, a man named Lawrence Pike, sat at the head. He was in his 60s, methodical, the kind of person who believed in contracts above all else. Vincent and Hugh sat on one side. Diane and I sat on the other. Claire wasn't there. Vincent had kept her out of it, probably to avoid questions. Lawrence opened the hearing with a simple statement. "We're here to determine if the amendment to the Whitmore Family Security Trust was executed properly." He looked at Vincent. "Mr. Whitmore, you signed an amendment on September 14th, changing the primary beneficiary from joint to your sister, Claire Whitmore. Is that correct?" Vincent nodded. "Yes, but it was temporary. A planning strategy." "Did you obtain Mrs. Whitmore's notarized consent before signing?" Lawrence asked. Vincent hesitated. "She was incapacitated. I had her interests in mind." "That's not what I asked," Lawrence said. "Did you obtain her written, notarized consent as required by the trust?" Vincent looked at Hugh. Hugh cleared his throat. We interpreted the medical power of attorney as sufficient. Diane didn't even wait for Lawrence to respond. She slid a document across the table. The medical power of attorney grants Vincent authority over healthcare decisions only. It explicitly excludes financial matters. This is stated on page 2. She pointed. Lawrence read it. His expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten. Mr. Barlow, did you review the scope of the power of attorney before proceeding? Hugh shifted. We believed it was broad enough. It's not, Lawrence said flatly. He turned to Vincent. Did Mrs. Whitmore sign the amendment? She was unconscious, Vincent said. His voice was defensive now. Then the answer is no, Lawrence said. He pulled out the trust document, flipped to page 32, and read the amendment clause aloud. When he finished, he looked up. This amendment is void. Vincent's face went white. We can correct it, Hugh said quickly. We can re-execute with proper consent. No, Diane said. The trust includes a forfeiture clause for procedural violations. Mr. Whitmore knowingly bypassed the consent requirement. He forfeits his beneficiary status. She slid the email chain across the table. This shows intent and awareness. Lawrence read the email. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. When he finished, he set the paper down carefully. Mr. Whitmore, he said, his voice even. Did you write this email? Vincent didn't answer. I'll take that as a yes, Lawrence said. He turned to the forfeiture clause, read it silently, then looked up. Based on the evidence, the amendment is void. And under section 12.4, Mr. Whitmore's interest in the trust is terminated. You can't do that, Vincent said. His voice cracked. I'm not doing it, Lawrence said. The trust language is. You violated the terms. This is the consequence. He turned to me. Mrs. Whitmore, as the original contributor of the trust assets and the sole remaining beneficiary, you now have full control. Do you wish to maintain the trust structure or dissolve it? I looked at Vincent. His face was red, his hands clenched. He looked like he wanted to overturn the table. I looked back at Lawrence. I'll dissolve it, I said. I want the assets transferred to an individual account under my name only. Lawrence nodded. I'll process that today. The freeze will lift once the transfer is complete. You should have access within 72 hours. He stood. The hearing was over. Vincent didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the table. Hugh gathered his papers quickly, avoiding eye contact. Diane and I stood. As we walked to the door, Vincent finally spoke. You're really going to do this? He asked. His voice was hollow. I stopped. I turned to face him. You did this, I said. You signed papers while I was dying. You gave my inheritance to your sister. You thought I'd never know or never fight back. I was trying to protect the family, he said weakly. I'm not your family anymore, Vincent, I said. I'm just the person whose money you tried to steal. I walked out. Diane followed. In the hallway, she put a hand on my shoulder. You did great, she said. I nodded. I felt light, untethered. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying someone else's weight. Vincent didn't come home that night. Or the next. I didn't ask where he went. I didn't care. 3 days later, the trust administrator called. The assets had been transferred. $837,000, now in an account with only my name. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the balance on my laptop screen. It felt surreal. Not the money. The freedom. I called Diane. It's done, I said. Good, she said. Now we talk about the house. Vincent's name was on the deed. But I'd been paying half the mortgage for 18 years. Diane filed a motion for partition, arguing I was entitled to equity. She also filed for legal separation, citing fraud and financial abuse. Vincent hired a different lawyer. Someone cheaper. Someone who couldn't undo what he'd already destroyed. The separation process took 4 months. In that time, Vincent tried to negotiate. He wanted a settlement, said we could split things fairly, said we didn't need to drag this out. I refused. I wanted everything documented, every lie exposed, every asset accounted for. Diane was relentless. She subpoenaed Vincent's financial records. We found other things. Small things. Cash withdrawals that didn't match his explanations. A secondary credit card I didn't know about. Payments to Claire that he'd hidden. None of it was illegal. But all of it was proof. Proof that I'd been managed, sidelined, erased. The house sold in March. We split the proceeds after the mortgage was paid off. I walked away with $93,000. Combined with the trust funds, I had just over $900,000. Vincent got his half of the house and nothing else. No trust. No inheritance. No future built on my family's money. The divorce was finalized in April. I didn't attend the final hearing. Diane handled it. I was already gone. I'd taken a job in Oregon, managing a community development project for a non-profit that actually paid well. I bought a small cabin outside Portland. It had 2 bedrooms, a wood stove, and a view of the mountains. It cost $200,000. I paid cash. The rest of the money went into investments. Real ones, managed by someone I hired myself. Someone who explained every decision, every risk, every fee. I learned the language of finance. I learned to read contracts. I learned to ask questions. And I learned that control isn't selfish. It's survival. Vincent tried to reach out once. He sent an email 6 months after the divorce. I'm sorry, it said. I made mistakes. I hope you're doing well. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Claire never contacted me. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was angry with Vincent, said he'd promised her security and delivered nothing. I didn't feel sorry for her. She'd been willing to take what wasn't hers. They deserved each other. I thought about the hospital a lot. About lying in that bed, tubes in my arm, pain ripping through my body. About Vincent standing there, his face calm, his words smooth. Just streamlining things. He'd seen my vulnerability as opportunity. And that told me everything I needed to know. Not just about him. About the kind of person I'd been. The kind who believed trust was the same as love. It wasn't. Love required honesty. And I'd been living with a man who traded in lies. In Oregon, I started over. I made new friends. People who didn't know Vincent, didn't know the story. I told them I was divorced. I didn't elaborate. They didn't push. I worked hard. The non-profit project was challenging, complicated. We were building a youth center in a low-income neighborhood. Funding was tight. Permits were a nightmare. But I loved it. I loved solving problems that mattered. I loved working with people who cared about something bigger than money. One day, my project manager, a woman named Beatrice, asked me to review a contract with a potential donor. I sat in her office and read through the terms. Halfway through, I stopped. This clause, I said, pointing. It gives them approval rights over how we spend the funds. That's not a donation. That's control. Beatrice blinked. I didn't catch that. Most people don't, I said. That's why they bury it on page 9. We renegotiated. The donor agreed to remove the clause. Beatrice looked at me with new respect. You're good at this, she said. I smiled. I learned the hard way. A year after the divorce, I got a message on social media. It was from Claire. I heard what Vincent did, she wrote. I didn't know the trust was your inheritance. He told me it was joint savings. I never would have accepted it if I'd known. I stared at the message. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me knew it didn't matter. She'd been willing to take it without asking questions. That was enough. I typed a reply. It's done now. I hope you're well. I didn't mean it. But I didn't need to carry anger anymore. I blocked her after that. Not out of spite. Out of boundaries. I was learning those too. Learning that I didn't owe anyone access to my life. Not my time, not my energy, not my forgiveness. I didn't owe Vincent an explanation for why I wouldn't take him back. I didn't owe Claire absolution for being complicit. I didn't owe anyone anything except myself. And what I owed myself was peace. 2 years after the divorce, I met someone. His name was Owen. He was a teacher, patient and kind. We met at a community meeting about school funding. He made me laugh. That was new. I told him about the divorce eventually. Not the details. Just the shape of it. He broke your trust, Owen said. It wasn't a question. Completely, I said. Owen nodded. My ex did something similar. Not money, but lies. Lots of them. We understood each other. We took things slow. I was careful now. I asked questions. I watched how he handled conflict, how he talked about his past, how he treated people when he thought no one was watching. He passed every test I didn't tell him I was giving. We didn't move in together. I liked my cabin. He liked his apartment. We liked each other. That was enough. One night, over dinner, he asked, "Do you think you'll ever trust someone completely again?" I thought about it. I don't know, I said honestly. But I trust myself now. That's more important. 3 years after the divorce, I got a letter. It was from Hugh Barlow's office. The envelope was thin, official. Inside was a notice. Hugh had been disbarred. A client had filed a complaint about forged documents in an estate case. The state bar investigated. They found a pattern. Hugh had been cutting corners for years. Vincent's trust amendment was cited as evidence. I sat on my porch and read the letter twice. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just a quiet acknowledgement that systems sometimes work. That fraud eventually surfaces. That sloppiness has consequences. I filed the letter away. I didn't frame it or celebrate it. It was just information. A closing of a loop I'd already moved past. That night, Owen came over. We cooked dinner together. He chopped vegetables while I made pasta. We talked about work, about the new budget proposal, about whether we should hike this weekend. Normal things. Good things. After dinner, we sat on the porch. The mountains were dark against the sky. "You seem lighter," Owen said, "than when we met." Lighter. I nodded. I am. I never saw Vincent again. I heard things occasionally. He'd remarried. Someone younger. Someone who didn't ask questions. I hoped she was smarter than I'd been. I hoped she read the paperwork. But it wasn't my problem anymore. Claire moved to Florida. I heard that from an old coworker who ran into her at a wedding. She was selling timeshares. I didn't ask for details. My life became simple. Work, friends, Owen, my cabin. I hiked on weekends. I read books I'd been meaning to read for years. I learned to play guitar badly. I volunteered at the youth center we'd built. It opened 2 years after I started. The kids called me Miss Arlene. They asked me questions about jobs, about college, about how to fill out forms. I helped them. I told them to read everything before they signed. I told them to ask questions. I told them that no one else would protect them if they didn't protect themselves. They listened. Some of them, anyway. That was enough. 5 years after the divorce, I received an email from the trust administrator, Lawrence Pike. He was retiring. He wanted to let me know the case had been used in training materials for trust administrators nationwide. "Your situation," he wrote, "highlighted the importance of procedural safeguards and the consequences of violating them. It's taught in workshops now as a case study in enforcement. I replied with a simple thank you. I didn't need credit. I didn't need attention. But I was glad the story mattered beyond me. Glad that maybe somewhere, someone else would be protected by the same claws that saved me. That night, I thought about the hospital. About Vincent's face. About how close I'd come to losing everything. Not the money. Myself. I'd almost let him erase me. Almost let him rewrite my life. But I hadn't. I'd read the paperwork. I'd asked the questions. I'd enforced the rules. And I'd survived. Not just survived. I'd rebuilt. Stronger. Clearer. Free. I'm 48 now. I still live in the cabin. Owen and I got married last year. Small ceremony. Just us and a few friends. No family. No drama. We wrote our own vows. Mine were simple. I promised to ask questions. I promised to read the paperwork. I promised to never let anyone make me smaller than I am. Owen smiled when I said them. He understood. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry about what Vincent did. If I think about it. I do think about it. But not with anger. With gratitude. Because that betrayal taught me the most important lesson of my life. No one will protect you if you don't protect yourself. No one will fight for you if you won't fight for yourself. And love without honesty isn't love. It's a contract you didn't read. I read everything now. Every word. Every clause. Every line. And I live by the rules I set. Not the ones someone else wrote for me. That's freedom. That's power. That's enough.